All right, as we always do, good afternoon firstly. As we always do, let's start the day by reflecting on the main stories that are leading in the printed newspaper headlines on a Sunday. So we'll do that in a moment with News 24 senior journalist Karyn Maughan, who is on standby. But before we do that, let's just show you what is on the front pages of those various papers. We start with the Sunday Times. And they have a story that has to do with the Road Accident Fund, and the headline says Letsoalo's Ring of Steel. Letsoalo's Ring of Steel. We'll tell you a bit more about that in just a moment. You do see the other story, of course, about the DA that is to the right of the front page of that paper. On the front page of the Sunday World, we have that story that has, in fact, it's the next headline I want to show you is the Sunday Tribune, is it? The Sunday Tribune is leading with a story that says battle lines drawn between GNU bedfellows. So also going on about that same story that has to do with the recent differences around the sacking of Andrew Whitfield as Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition. And lastly, the Sunday World leads with a story that says Zuma throws Hlophe under the bus. And this has to do with the internal ructions inside the Umkhonto weSizwe party, in particular around the leadership of the party in Mpumalanga province. So let's get into it then with senior journalist at News 24, my good friend Karyn Maughan. Good afternoon, Karyn.
Thank you for having me, Tulas.
I feel like we should be allowed like a good 3 minutes to just be friends, you know, and
just exactly.
just chit-chat, you know, shoot the breeze and not talk about the serious matters of the country. But unfortunately, we have to do that. Let's start with the lead story on the Sunday Times. So this has been brewing for a while, hasn't it? The many legs of the story around the Road Accident Fund. Mm-hmm. And now we're reading a bit more detail about the security around Collins Letsoalo. Tell me what you thought of the story.
No, I think it's an excellent story. And I mean, you as someone who's working within the legal profession as well will know that the Road Accident Fund is a major source of litigation within our courts. The management of those cases has been at the center of potential Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice candidate Dunstan and Mlambo's efforts to deal with the amount of litigation. For viewers not familiar, of course, the Road Accident Fund is basically set up to assist people who are injured or killed or their family members are killed in road accidents, and then they're entitled to compensation depending on the extent of their injuries and the kind of repercussions for them. So it gives away billions and billions of rands, often after litigation, to people who are desperate for that money. And unfortunately, it has been a site of a great deal of alleged financial mismanagement and alleged fraud. And we know, of course, Tulas, that SCOPA, which is the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, now being run by Zongezo Zibi, our former colleague from Business Day, who's doing an excellent job there, is now looking very much into the Road Accident Fund and those allegations of financial mismanagement. Collins Letsoalo, the CEO, suspended earlier this month for failing to appear before SCOPA and answering to certain questions that SCOPA had in terms of the running of the RAF. And now Sunday Times producing a very well-researched story that indicates that he is getting security that's on the level of the president, 9 bodyguards, an armored vehicle, in circumstances where the report is suggesting that his claims of his life being under threat and his need for his family's security are not necessarily factually grounded.
Yeah, some excellent reporting there from our colleague Thando Kolojika, getting into the details of that security detail. And I liked how the comparisons were drawn, as you say, between the security that he receives, Collins Letsoalo, and that received by the president and deputy president. And in fact, the comparison then says only the president and deputy president have tighter security around them. This includes 3 vehicles. I think they're called Golf 8s. Doesn't it remind you of an era, though, Karyn? A larger-than-life figure at the helm of an SOE who has his supporters who say that he represents the best of the best among us, but yet very controversial, and the paper trail slowly emerging. That's the impression that I've been having. It feels like I've seen this movie before.
I mean, I think there is that he is a very controversial figure. And I think that the parliamentary oversight of SCOPA, this desire that they have to look into the running of the road accident fund beyond just his incredibly important to us. Because, you know, I think that the more we investigate and the more there examination of the RAF and how it's operating, the better for all of us. Because I think there are serious indications, for instance, question marks around the SIU investigating him.
Yeah.
Allegations of potential irregularities. And ultimately, that may vindicate him. There may be evidence that shows that, you know, while he is at the helm of the investigation, he has done the responsible thing.
Yeah.
But in order for that investigation to be done properly, that evidence needs to come to light. And the RAF and whoever else is the board, etc., needs to cooperate with SCOPA so that we know what actually has happened there and then can make informed decisions. Because, of course, Letshwalo's term comes to an end in August anyway. So there is going to be a need for a replacement. And, you know, that person needs to walk into that organization fully equipped to know what needs to be done there.
Yeah. In fact, the next story that I want us to look at is both on the Sunday Times as well as the Sunday Tribune. So we'll just show the Sunday Tribune front page where they're leading with a story that says battle lines drawn between GNU bedfellows. It's out of the realm of politics, Karyn, an area that I know that you follow with keen interest as well, while your main interest is in legal matters. So this was quite an anticipated announcement by the Democratic Alliance, what they were going to do. But I see that on the Sunday Times, they say that there was great internal debate, but the side or faction, if you want to call it that, aligned with John Steenhuisen prevailed and said, actually, let's not pull out of the GNU. But that was something that was very much on the table.
I think what's fascinating about this is that the DA is definitely putting itself in a position to really put the pressure on the ANC and President Ramaphosa to essentially get rid of them. And, you know, if and when that happens, Tulas, they will very much use the rhetoric of the ANC government not being willing to deal with the corruption within its ranks, but being willing to get rid of what they would describe as high-performing, highly functional ministers who have essentially done a far better job than those within the ANC who are in high and powerful positions. And they will continue this rhetoric as they have yesterday, as they've continually over the last few days, as the GNU again comes to this point of crisis. This rhetoric about the ANC and Ramaphosa unwilling to deal with alleged corruption within their own ranks, while simultaneously being willing to, fire a DA minister, deputy minister for insubordination. And they're saying that they're going to not support the budgets linked to Tembi Simelane, for example, Minister Nkabane, that they are talking about David Mahlobo as well. Anyone who's read the state capture report know that there are a lot of people in positions of power who have very serious clouds hanging over their head. And so I think the DA realizes that for them, strategically, it would be far better for them to be kicked out than to voluntarily walk away. And Tulas, you and I will both know, and this is a continuous complaint, the president doesn't like to make decisions. So putting him in the position where now he has to be the one to pull the plug on this relationship in circumstances where it's not entirely clear who he will then go into coalition with, I think strategically is actually quite a smart move from them.
That's an interesting read of it, Karyn. I hadn't thought of it that way, that it's we dare you to expel us from the GNU. We will not make it easy for you and walk away. We want you to be the one to make that decision. But now, Karyn, there's a bit of, a sense that the DA, whenever they are unhappy about an issue inside the GNU, they frame it as an existential threat to the entire framework. And everyone expects that, okay, if it's an existential threat, for instance, the last few days, they were saying all bets are off. And everyone thought, okay, it means that there's going to be a serious escalation. What's the risk of them framing it that way each and every time there's a huge issue around which they don't agree with the other partners?
I think the way that you framed that question is excellent, and I think it's very clear. I mean, if you continuously cry wolf in a country where, you know, there is this desperate need for a sense of solution, a positive future, a shared engagement that is about taking the country forward, to us, especially in circumstances where South Africa has come under so much misinformation and false narrative claims about a quote unquote white genocide and, expropriation and all this alarmist rhetoric, for a party to be unwilling to sort of be seen to be part of the solution and to continuously wave that kind of, well, it's all going to go to hell if we don't get what we want, I think will also put voters off. We want to see leaders who actually care about the democracy before they care about their own political party interests. And I think that there is a degree of frustration that every time, and I think the ANC also needs to play a part in this, because I think they have become very resolute in this identity as sort of the defining partner of the GNU with all the power that it provides. So there is negotiation and compromise needed on their part. But, I think it is frustrating to voters that we lurch from one crisis to another in circumstances within the geopolitical context in which we exist. The world is so unstable, and we're desperate for leaders who show a sense of responsibility and stability and shared, unified attempts to take the country forward in a way that actually helps and doesn't hurt us.
All right. I must mention that I'm scheduled to speak to Wille Oukamp in the next few minutes of the DA, so I look forward to that conversation. Lastly, Karyn, let's look at the Sunday World front page. The lead story there is Zuma throws Hlophe under the bus. Lots of goings on in the MK party as well, and this has to do with the litigation that's been happening in Mpumalanga around the provincial leadership, does it?
Yes, I mean, we know that story. It came out quite a while ago. The Mpumalanga convener, Mary Padi, had made certain allegations of sexual harassment against John Hlophe. And then subsequent to that, she was effectively removed, and she then brought litigation about in the Mpumalanga High Court, which for whatever reason was not opposed, and it resulted in her getting her position back and being able to return to her position. Jacob Zuma has now filed an affidavit in that court saying that non-opposition was essentially a result of John Hlophe appointing his very long-standing personal lawyer, Barnabas Kulu, who of course has been representing the MK in its quite disastrous election challenging cases in the electoral court, to then bring about opposition to that application, and that not happening. And Zuma is saying, we didn't know anything about this. Very much, I think the headline, throwing Hlophe under the bus. And of course, in the context of the recent drama with Floyd Shivambu, it's going to continually raise questions about the stability of the MK and its leadership.
All right. Karyn, I've got to thank you for your time. That's Karyn Maughan there, my good friend from News 24, senior journalist, weighing in on the various stories that you are seeing on the front pages of the newspapers this afternoon. All right, stand by. In the next few minutes, we'll turn our attention to the goings on in the Government of National Unity. And in fact, we will be talking a bit more about the move that the Democratic Alliance has made, which is not the move that many people had expected. That conversation and more coming up in the next few minutes.